It was a cave, and inside that cave it had 7 different caverns.
Well, we don't find any. So we don't have a progression, an evolution to show where this came from.
Deep in a lab, a scientist stares at a screen, completely stunned. The results of a new DNA test have just come in, taken from the ancient remains of the Aztecs. For generations, we believed they were a single, powerful tribe that built a magnificent empire. But this genetic data tells a different story, a much more disturbing one. The test reveals the Aztecs' true identity by showing who they weren't. It uncovers a massive genetic replacement, a population vanishing act that has been hidden for centuries. What really happened in the Valley of Mexico was far worse than we thought. Unlocking a 500-year-old mystery. The game changed when scientists got their hands on ancient DNA. Think of ancient DNA as the ultimate time machine. A tiny piece of bone or a tooth can hold the entire genetic blueprint of a person who lived centuries ago. The breakthrough moment came when a team of researchers managed to pull mitochondrial DNA from skeletons found in Tlatelolco, Tenochtitlan's sister city.
Archaeologists have so far uncovered well over 600 skulls and have been working for the past 6 years to uncover the whole structure and to learn more about its construction.
Mitochondrial DNA is special. It's passed down from mother to child, acting like a genetic passport that can trace ancestry back through generations. Everyone expected the DNA to confirm the simple story of the Mexica migration, but it didn't. To put it mildly, the results were a bombshell. The genetic signatures didn't match a single neat origin story. Instead, they pointed to a complex web of population movements, conquests, and something far more unsettling, evidence of genetic replacement on a scale that was hard to believe. It was as if the genetic landscape of the entire region had been totally transformed. This was just the first clue, the first hint that the rise of the Aztecs wasn't just about building temples and conquering cities. It was about something much more fundamental, something that happened at the level of DNA itself. Many people are crazy about ancient mysteries, but this one was different. This wasn't about a lost city of gold, it was about lost people. The initial findings from Tlatelolco were so shocking they sparked a wave of new studies. Scientists began testing remains from archaeological sites all across central Mexico, hunting for more clues. And as more data poured in, a disturbing pattern began to take shape, one that pointed to a systematic and deliberate reshaping of the human population. The traditional narrative of the Aztecs as empire builders was starting to crumble, replaced by a much more sinister picture. They weren't just conquering people, in some cases they were replacing them entirely. The DNA was telling a story that had been silenced for 500 years, a story of a genetic empire built on the ghosts of vanished populations. But one specific site held the key to the darkest chapter of this story. Where did the otomi go? Now this is where the story takes a seriously chilling turn. Before the Aztecs rose to power, the Valley of Mexico was a patchwork of different city-states and cultures. One of the most important centers was a city called Zaltocan. For centuries, Zaltocan was the capital of the Otomi people. These weren't just some small, isolated villagers. The Otomi were a sophisticated civilization with their own language, art, and political power. They had been living in the region for generations, long before the word Aztec was ever uttered. But when the Aztecs began their massive expansion, Zaltocan was in their way. What happened next is a mystery that has puzzled historians for ages. One moment, the Otomi are there, a thriving and vibrant culture. The next, they seem to vanish from the historical record. Poof, gone. For years, experts had two main theories. The first was that the Otomi were peacefully assimilated. You know, they intermarried with the Aztecs, adopted their culture, and just became part of the growing empire. The second theory was that they saw the writing on the wall, packed their bags, and moved somewhere else to avoid being conquered. Both theories sound perfectly reasonable, but not all things are what they seem. When scientists finally managed to analyze ancient DNA from skeletons buried in Zaltocan, both of those theories went right out the window. The results were not just surprising, they were horrifying. The research team, led by the University of Texas, compared DNA from before and after the Aztec conquest of the city. The before samples showed a clear, distinct genetic profile, the signature of the Otomi people. But the samples from after the conquest told a completely different story. The original otomi genetic markers were almost entirely gone, wiped out. In their place was a new genetic signature that matched populations from the Aztec heartland. This wasn't a gradual mixing of people over time. This was a wholesale population replacement. It was as if the original inhabitants had been scooped out and an entirely new group of people had been dropped in. The genetic data suggested that the disappearance of the otomi wasn't an accident or a peaceful migration. It was the result of a deliberate, systematic process. The implications are, to be blunt, staggering. The Aztecs didn't just conquer Zaltocan, they remade it in their own genetic image. And if this could happen in one city, where else did it happen? The dark side of conquest. Let's really think about what these DNA findings mean. Imagine if a foreign power took over your city, and a few years later genetic tests showed that almost nobody living there was related to the original inhabitants. That's essentially what the evidence from Zaltocan suggests. The scientists who made this discovery didn't pull any punches. They concluded that the Aztec conquest wasn't just a change in leadership, it was a move that fundamentally re-engineered the genetic landscape of central Mexico. And the thing is, Zaltocan wasn't a one-off event. As researchers tested more ancient remains from other sites across the former Aztec Empire, they kept finding similar patterns. Local populations with unique genetic signatures were systematically replaced by people with different DNA. This process is now being called demographic replacement. It's a clean, scientific-sounding term for something that was likely messy and brutal. We're not talking about a few new families moving into a town. We're talking about a demographic shift so massive it may have been one of the largest population displacements in the history of the ancient Americas. The logistics of this are mind-boggling. To completely change the genetic makeup of an entire region, you have to move huge numbers of people over hundreds of miles. This suggests the Aztecs weren't just conquering and taxing people, they were actively micromanaging the populations of their empire. Some experts have even started using the term genetic colonization to describe what the DNA shows. This was a systematic effort to plant their own people, or their allies, in conquered lands. This completely changes our understanding of what the Aztec Empire was. It was more than a military and political machine, it was a demographic one too. The question that hangs over all of this is, what happened to the original people? The DNA tells us they disappeared from the local gene pool, but it doesn't say how. Some might have been forcibly moved to other parts of the empire. Others may have been scattered. But the complete and total replacement of some genetic lines raises a darker possibility that local populations were systematically eliminated to make way for newcomers. The battlefield, it turns out, wasn't just for warriors, it was for the DNA of entire civilizations. But this raises an even bigger question. Who were the Aztecs really? Signatures in the blood. Now let's circle back to one of the biggest mysteries of all, the Aztec origin story. Remember how they claimed to have come from a mythical northern homeland called Aztlan? For a long time, historians thought it was just a legend. But the new DNA evidence suggests there might be more to that story than anyone thought. A lot more. Recent genetic studies looking at the Y chromosome, the DNA passed down from father to son, have uncovered something that has archaeologists buzzing. They found that the genetic diversity among people who identify as Aztec descendants today is absolutely massive. It's far more diverse than what you would expect from a single tribe that migrated south. We're talking about a whole alphabet soup of genetic markers known as haplogroups. These are like clan names written in our DNA. The tests found haplogroups like QM3, QL663, and QPV3, among many others. These aren't just random letters and numbers. They are distinct genetic signatures that tell a story of multiple waves of migration and the mixing of many different groups of people. What this implies is staggering. The people we call the Aztecs probably weren't a single ethnic group at all. It's more likely they were a complex coalition of different peoples, from different regions with different genetic backgrounds, who came together to form the empire. But here's the kicker. The genetic evidence suggests these different groups didn't just slowly and peacefully merge over time. The DNA patterns point to rapid, large-scale population movements that happened at the exact same time that original inhabitants, like the Otomi, were disappearing from their lands. Some geneticists now believe the Aztec expansion wasn't just a military conquest, it was a series of organized population transfers. Think about the level of planning that would take. Coordinating the movement of tens or even hundreds of thousands of people across rugged terrain hundreds of miles from home. It would have required a level of central organization that rivals modern states. The myth of Aztlan might have been a unifying story created to bind together this diverse coalition of peoples who were together reshaping the face of Mesoamerica. So, if this is all true, what does it mean for how we see history? What the bones remember. So let's take a step back for a moment, just you and me, and really think about what we're looking at here. People come to stories like this because they're searching for mystery, for discovery, for that one moment that makes history feel alive again. And make no mistake, we've found a mystery. But we have to ask ourselves, is this story really true? Did it all unfold the way we've always been told? Or is there something deeper, something hidden beneath centuries of retelling and romanticized legend? The new DNA evidence doesn't lie. It's not opinion. It's not speculation. It's data. Cold, precise, unblinking science. And that science is forcing historians, archaeologists, and geneticists to reevaluate one of the most celebrated civilizations on Earth, the Aztecs. For generations, we've been told a story about fierce Mexica warriors, brilliant builders, and priests who could read the heavens. The Aztec Empire, we were taught, rose through courage, discipline, and divine destiny. But this new evidence tells a far more complicated and far more unsettling version of events. What we're seeing now suggests that the Aztecs weren't just conquerors, they were social engineers. They didn't merely expand their territory, they restructured entire populations, moving groups of people across regions, erasing some, absorbing others. What used to be described as military conquest now looks a lot more like organized demographic control, and that revelation changes everything. Because it means the rise of the Aztec Empire wasn't just a triumph of might, it came at a staggering human cost. Entire communities, entire languages, and entire ways of life may have been systematically erased. The cities and temples we admire today could be built, quite literally, on the remains of forgotten nations. Before the Aztecs dominated central Mexico, millions of people lived there. Diverse, unique, complex societies whose stories vanished from record. But their DNA didn't vanish. It survived, quietly, buried within the genes of their conquerors' descendants. And now, centuries later, that DNA is speaking, revealing a hidden history of displacement, replacement, and silence. What were the Aztecs really trying to do? Was this mass population reshaping purely strategic, a way to weaken resistance, to prevent rebellion by scattering potential enemies? Or was it ideological? A way to forge a single identity out of many, to create a new world order centered around Tenochtitlan? These are the questions haunting researchers today. And they're not easy to answer because for every genetic clue, there's still so much missing context. The bones tell us who moved where. The genomes tell us who mixed with whom. But they don't tell us why. Still, the implications are massive. For the first time, modern science is giving voice to people history forgot. People whose names were never written down, whose temples were destroyed, whose descendants no longer know where they came from. Their genetic footprints remain, and through them we can trace the story of an empire not just of warriors and kings, but of manipulation, assimilation, and control. The Aztecs, long seen as victims of European conquest, now appear in a new light, both as builders of greatness and as architects of loss. This new DNA evidence paints a much darker picture of the Aztec Empire. Does knowing about this systematic population replacement change how you view their legacy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more secrets from history revealed, make sure to like and subscribe.